there we go. That's a perfect way to start the show. Excellent. Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Sound Speed Act, where we take you inside the mind of creators, the movers, and the shakers. I'm your host, Cheryl Texiera, and I'm very excited to have our first guest ever on. You know him as the Emmy-Nominated writer from Phineas and Ferb and Milo Murphy's Law, and the co-author of Shipwreckers, The Curse of the Cursed, Temple of Curses, or We Nearly Died a Lot. He's not only a brilliantly creatively talented person, he's also a dear friend, Mr. Josh Pruett.
Hello, dear.
Hi. I am so excited to have you on right now.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh my gosh. So I guess this is where I drive the ship, huh?
Yeah, probably. It's your ship.
This is what happens.
It's your ship.
Well, first off, I wanted you to kind of take us inside to tell us a bit about your journey. Like,
okay.
You do cartoons, you also write books, you also are currently I got a little intel about a feature possibly coming out.
Maybe,
I guess tell us a bit about how it all started and what brought you
all
here
the way
today.
back?
Yeah, all the way back. Yeah.
So when I was younger, when I was a kid, I kind of thought I wanted to be a monster designer.
Oh.
I thought I wanted to work for Stan Winston. So when I was a teenager, there was a magazine called Cinefex.
Okay.
And so it was a trade periodical for the effects industry. Mm-hmm. So my dad had a bunch of them, and they had an article in there about Crash McCreary, who did the designs for Jurassic Park.
Holy goodness.
Yeah, so that was a big inspiration to me. They showed a lot of the designs that he did for the movie called The Relic. Mm-hmm. And, I just was drawing monsters all the time as a kid.
Oh my God.
I was also always writing short stories.
Yeah.
But so I didn't know how it would all kind of work together until Toy Story came out. And so this was
how
95,
old were you
96.
You 14,
So this
15?
was 16 or 17 probably.
Okay.
So I love comic strips, I love animation, I love movies. Mm-hmm. My parents were big movie buffs. I was super into anything fantasy or horror. I was always really scared of this stuff.
Yeah.
But I was the kid on the playground who was asking people questions about how did Freddy Krueger work? What's the deal with the guy in the hockey mask? I was too scared to watch it, but I was collecting all this data. Would
you end up going to watch it?
In video at friends' houses.
Okay.
I couldn't watch it at my own house.
So first off, when you say you wanted to be a monster creator, do you mean that you actually wanted to be someone on set doing special effects?
I wasn't really sure.
Doing the plastic, making the Freddy mask?
It was kind of all of it, because what I discovered is that there were people who were designing it, who were drawing it, and then fabricating.
Okay.
And I didn't really understand about the fabricating until I was getting older. And I was like, oh, this is so cool.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, well, that might be a job.
Yeah.
Monster builder or designer or both.
Completely. I would just imagine, even my brain just right now, put them together. I was the person who did the mask obviously designed it, and that's not...
That's not necessarily always the case.
Yeah.
Because there'll be sculptors, and there are people who work in different stages of that process. So my dad was really big into film, and so he had a lot of making of books. And so I would just study them, and I learned what storyboards were from that.
Oh.
Because I didn't, most people don't know what storyboards are, and most of the time storyboards are this comic strip version of certain film scenes, right? Of course.
Yes.
But the idea is that it's a dry run for complicated special effects sequences. These days, most storyboarding is for that. For action, for effect sequences. They do things called previs. That's also digital storyboarding. Mm-hmm. But back in the day, animation was storyboarding. Disney kind of pioneered that process to do the whole thing. Yep. You draw the whole movie. Mm-hmm. In live action, going back to movies like Ben-Hur, primarily they were storyboarding complicated action set pieces.
And they're not going to storyboard the whole movie
not
because
for that.
You're and then the couple falls in love. But then there's this car chase.
Exactly.
And the way the car chase is going to go, that's when you... So I didn't even realize that, because when you say storyboard, maybe it's because I know you as an animator.
Yeah.
I just assume, no, they storyboard for animation, but I didn't realize. So you were reading books specifically about these special effects, and that's kind of what naturally. This was after you were already crazy fascinated by the creepy, the weird, and the scary.
Totally. Okay. And I was trying to figure out what's my role.
Yes.
in all of that.
Completely.
And so I remember I was working at like Bookstar in college, and
Is Bookstar like Barnes and Noble?
It was like purchased by, I think it was purchased by Barnes and Noble at some point, or they're the same company.
Or like Borders, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, got it.
But on my breaks, I'd be there's a book about Hitchcock's pre-production process, and he storyboarded almost everything. He was one of the few people who did.
Okay.
And so when that book came out, like I would just pour over that, and it was like there's all these stories of him falling asleep on set because he had already storyboarded it, knew what the shot was going to be, and he just needed to get the shot.
And so, like, he let everybody know, here's what we're doing.
Here's the storyboard, and I'm going to take a nap.
Can't wait to see my film.
And I don't know that I wanted to do that, but I was like, this is so cool. Like, you can pre-plan your movie. And I was like, oh, maybe I can do that.
Okay.
And then Toy Story came out, and I realized that in animation, you get to do both.
Yes.
So the interesting thing this is just like context.
Yeah.
So there's two kinds of animated TV series. One is scripted. One's board-driven.
Oh.
The scripted series works from a full script, and board-driven works from an outline, and the board teams will write and storyboard the entire episode.
Give me an example of each.
So for scripted, it's Simpsons.
Okay.
And board-driven is Phineas and Ferb, or Ren and Stimpy.
Got it.
And SpongeBob back in the day.
And the board-driven, you're also writing the script, but you're leading with the board versus Simpsons, you're leading with the script.
That's exactly right.
Oh, I love it. Okay,
and
great.
so what I discovered was in feature animation, it was also the same. Some movies...
In feature animation.
Yes. So some movies were, and this is kind of where the overlap was, is that some movies, the storyboard artists or story artists actually took the board word out. Mm-hmm. Some of them were writing. So on Toy Story, a lot of the board artists were also writers.
Yeah.
So they're coming up with character moments and bits. They were helping with the character arcs.
I love that.
And they're technically writing, but with storyboards.
Yeah.
And so they would have a script, get it up in boards, and then rewrite the board.
Okay, yes.
So what I realized was, maybe I can combine my writing passion and drawing and like pursue that.
Yeah.
So then I popped around the community colleges and stuff, but ended up at Fullerton because Fullerton had an entertainment art animation program. And while I was there, I was like, I'm going to try the storyboard thing.
Oh my gosh.
So that was like, that's how it all kind of got mushy, and then I started to get focused.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So when you say it wasn't till Toy Story, it wasn't that you went and you saw Toy Story and you're like, I want to do that. It was more like you saw some behind the scenes footage you must have to understand what it was. Okay, great.
And their DVDs were really wonderful. At the time, it was like film school in a box.
Oh my gosh.
Because it was like, this is how we do it.
Yeah, there were a ton of like extra. I feel like we miss out. I mean, we have such a plethora of content now, but yeah, there is a bit of missing out on like, I love this movie. Now I get to see how this movie was made.
Exactly.
Like that,
So on one level, it's like demystification of the process. Yeah. But it was also like hugely educational. Yes. And so like what they had on these DVD features is that they had like, they would show you the storyboard and then show you the actual board artist pitching it.
Oh my gosh.
So he would have the board up.
Yes.
And then be taking you through every panel, doing all the acting and performance, doing all the jokes, doing the voices.
And you would actually say, are you saying that this was specifically for Toy Story, or in your class, this is what?
Both. So what happened was I was inspired by what they had on like Bugs Life DVD, Toy Story DVD. Yeah. And I did it myself in my college program. Okay. I just decided, well, if that's what I want to do, I might as well copy.
Are you serious?
So wait. I did it. So as a part of my program, I was like, okay, I storyboarded a sequence, but then I pitched it to the whole class, recorded it, and then recorded myself and intercut them. Great. So as part of like my senior, like it wasn't graduate school yet, but like my senior project was making a DVD bonus feature for something that I had written and storyboarded.
Stop it right now. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a great special feature.
And I had this guy who was one of our teachers who worked at, I will not name names, who had worked in feature animation. Yeah. And like he wasn't real thrilled with my story. Oh. I had done like Hansel and Gretel who were cannibals. Oh. And it was like really gross. It was really
sick.
fun.
I love it.
Yeah, super sick. But his only comment, and I had gotten laughs, which was like the greatest thing. I had my whole class there. And he was like, yeah, I don't know. It kind of feels like a DreamWorks movie. And like he just didn't care for the sense of humor, I guess. But that's where I ended up working. So I was like, oh, this worked out great.
How is that at all an insult?
It was
Obviously,
very strange.
It's because of where he was possibly
Yes,
working that
it
he'd
was
be
just
like, this
his
other
POV.
company.
Yeah.
I'd be like, great, I'll go work for DreamWorks.
Great.
Hey.
Good plan.
So, yeah.
That's what I'm shooting for.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned graduate school. Did you go to graduate school?
Yeah, at the time, I didn't think that my drawing skills were really up to snuff. And so I wanted more opportunities, one, to grow as an artist, but also for internships. Because if I stayed, I'd have a shot at interning at other places.
Okay.
It took me like 3 times to get into DreamWorks, but I finally did.
Specifically through your college program.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So I mean, it worked out pretty well for you.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times, especially when it comes to artists, schooling is a big question. And
oh yeah. For me, it was much more about community.
Yeah.
And an opportunity to kind of strike my own path.
Yeah.
And carve it out.
Because by the time that you graduated undergrad, did you know by that point you were like, I want to do animation, I want to do this?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I
Really?
was still writing, and I had an interesting experience where we were doing a technical program with some folks from Warner Brothers, actually.
Okay.
And I kept getting pulled in to do story notes and feedback.
Oh,
so my
that's
storyboards
great.
were okay.
Okay.
But I seemed to really have an instinct for this stuff, and so I was trying to figure out.
Specifically for cartoons.
And for story.
For story.
And
okay,
for story.
got it,
So
got
I
it.
had dear friends who were really great animators.
Yeah.
And I was called the Antimator because it was just not my skill set, but it was also not the thing I was passionate about. And so people would ask me to come in and help on their stories for their short films.
Great.
And so I started to get a reputation. And I was like, oh, I think this is my skill set.
Yes.
I think this is the thing I'm good at.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is so fascinating because being a writer, there are so many different styles of writing and ways to write.
Yes.
But you were also an avid reader. So
Yes.
obviously, I'm sure that played into you naturally understanding beginning, middle, and character development. Definitely. And then drawing, did you always just doodle?
Yeah, always had a sketchbook and was always creating characters, and I still have some of that stuff.
Okay.
I think I was like 4 or 5 and created like Lightning Lad and like his dog, and I was able to show my kids the drawings like last year. It was really cool.
God.
But yeah, I was kind of always doing both.
Okay.
I was always doing both.
And then so you're in DreamWorks simply from graduating.
Yeah, I got an internship there and finished my master's degree, and then
Okay.
they asked me to stay on for the summer paid internship.
Okay.
And it was after that I got into production.
Okay.
Because my stuff wasn't...
Were you not in production through the internship?
So it was just development.
Okay.
So the idea was, if I'm going to get a job, I need to be on a show.
I'm sorry, but what's the difference?
The way they had development set up is that it's its own department.
Yeah.
So it had very limited resources. There aren't a lot of jobs in development. Exactly.
Is development what was your day to day in development?
So I was working with like the research library. So we had a research library. We were collecting information. Like for instance, if we were doing a movie about sharks. So this was after Shark Tale.
Okay.
So like I would collect a bunch of like Wikipedia articles about sharks, noteworthy information about sharks.
Oh.
You compile all that stuff. Then you give that to the artists when they're working on whatever movie it is, or the writers. And then other times I'd go in and I'd be taking notes. So I'd be sitting in a big brainstorm and I'd have to type up all the notes or get people coffee.
This is genius. So I have to say, people don't know this.
Oh, okay.
Like this is the crux of
why
I'm doing this, because that's so
yeah.
fascinating. Because I do wonder, something as simple as I recently saw a movie with animals. That's such a basic thing. It was one of the many.
Yes. Yes.
But there was like a specific trait, like something like Finding Nemo.
Yes.
How do you know what types of fish are specific types of fish? And it's because of this development.
Yeah, and you do
department.
research. So part of the idea is that like that department can help kick off that process. So sometimes they'll feed that to the teams, especially very early on.
Yeah.
Like while it's in a baking stage.
Yeah.
And then there are also, scripts are coming in. So we've got the weekend read. So I'm helping prep the weekend read, and there's 12 scripts, 3 treatments. And so some of it is like, I'm just at a photocopier most of my day.
Yeah.
But the idea is that I'm reading the stuff too. Yeah. And the people I was working with at the time were very open with that. They were very much like, yeah, Josh, make sure you read all this stuff so you know what we're doing. You know what goes into it. So that was a huge education for me.
Gosh.
The access was really amazing.
That's insane.
Yeah, and they fed me.
I
That
hear
was
DreamWorks
huge.
is very good with
Yeah, it was
their
great.
employees.
It was great.
So now you get a job in production.
Yeah.
And
so
how did that change things? And was it terrifying?
It was super terrifying. So I was trying to just find work, and while I was there, I'd made some friends.
Yeah.
And Shrek the Third was looking for a new PA, production assistant.
Yeah.
So I physically moved to the next building, and it was in the story department, which is where I wanted to be.
Great.
And so then that job ended up being, but this was before digital storyboards. We were transitioning. So everyone was still drawing traditionally.
Okay.
So part of my job was to actually photograph everyone's storyboards, hundreds of storyboards.
That was the job as the PA.
Yes. So
Every single one.
Yeah. So the storyboards would come in. My responsibility was to number all of these storyboards by hand with stickers and then shoot them on a down shooter. So it was literally a digital camera, line it up, shoot it, and it's long nights and weekends.
Completely.
But I'm right there.
Yes.
So I get to work with all the artists.
Yeah.
I got to meet everybody. They're really wonderful and supportive. Set up all their pitches. So I got to. So finally, after watching those Toy Story DVDs, I actually got to see pros do it for real.
You're in the environment.
I was there.
It's like night and day. It's different. So then, how did we go? How did we transition from being the PA to being Emmy-nominated, which is insane?
It was wild. So the first big hurdle was getting in as a creative.
Yes, because saying a PA, it's like, no problem. You're not making waves.
Right, and you're trying to learn and absorb. And so I ended up on Over the Hedge as coordinator. I got promoted. Okay. And I asked if I could take the trainee test, the story trainee test. Okay. So they had, they would reach out to schools like CalArts and not Fullerton so much. We were a state school, CalArts Art Center, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And they would bring in new talent, pay them, they get to pay them less because they're fresh from school. Yeah. And then they would train them to be story artists. And so I asked if I could take the test. Yeah. And they told me no.
Why? Because you were already an employee?
I was in production. Mm-hmm. And they said they actively discourage production candidates from transitioning from production to the art side.
Why?
That was all they said.
Oh my God.
So my take home...
We're actively putting up roadblocks.
Exactly.
And
I was like, I thought this is what you did. Yeah. Like, you got your foot in the door, and then you kept moving your way up. Completely. But because they're two different ladders, from their POV, I could not jump to this ladder. So I waited a year, worked on Over the Hedge, then worked on B-Movie for a little while in the art department, still as a coordinator. Yep. Waited for those people to get fired. They did. Okay. I asked the new people. They said, of course you can. Yeah. Of course you can take the test. You know how all this works. It's no skin off our back. And if you win, everyone wins.
Wait a second. So
it's just personal.
Is that person still there?
No, they're not.
Okay. All right.
But this person, his name is John Tarnoff. He changed my life just because he said yes.
Simply because he said yes.
He was like, he's like, no, this is good. If you do a good job, we all win. Yes. Yeah. And how often have you come up against that in your career? Too much. Right. That was the big one. That was a really big educational step for me. But that was awesome that you asked again. Go on. Yeah, because I was like, I'm not going to give up. And I'm here, and this is great, and I want to do this. Right. So I did the test. Yeah. I asked the people I was working with if they could look at my test. I got some notes. Okay. And I got in. And I was the first production candidate to actually make that transition from production to the art side at DreamWorks in the history of the company. Because you heard no, and instead of accepting no as anything, you were like, okay, cool. You did wait a year, though. It wasn't like you just kept being like, hi, no. Right. Because it just seemed like it was the wrong door. So I needed a new door. It was a new person. It is so interesting how some people, I feel like some people, particularly in this industry, and I'm sure it's every industry to some degree, but they have no problem. It's like, stay where you are. It makes my life easier, and I feel more comfortable with that. Yes. So then what job did you go to? So yeah, my life changed. So I was working on B-Movie and not very happy. And they asked me to come downstairs. They handed me a buck slip, and they're like, you're going to want to take notes. Oh my gosh. And they offered me a 4-year contract as a story artist. So my whole life changed. This is 2006. So everything changed. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I ran outside the gates at DreamWorks and called my fiance then at that point. Called all my friends. Yeah, called everybody that I knew. It was amazing. It was amazing. How old were you? 27? I mean, that's amazing. 28, yeah.
That's young too.
Yeah.
Have you do you feel like that is young now that you're
It felt old to me.
It felt old. Okay.
I felt like it was a late start because my friends had all already graduated because staying for the masters was 2 years.
Yes.
And so I felt like I was kind of behind.
Yeah.
So far it hasn't continued to feel like that.
Good.
But it did at the time.
When I met you, you were already established. You were in
I'm glad that's a perception.
That was how I saw it because you had your own office space.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were still at DreamWorks at the time. I thought you were, but maybe. And one thing that I remember from your production space, which I thought was so inspiring, and I want to know if you still have it, is you had a whiteboard up.
Yes.
And each one, it was you, Justin, and there was
Ryan,
and Ryan, and each of you had your names and you had your goals up on the board. And I remember one of yours, it was either a 5-year or a 10-year goal was to write a novel.
Yeah.
And but you had it marked, you had it charted.
Yep.
And it was up there in your office every single day. Do you still have that and do that?
So we don't have the space anymore, but we did. So what happened was I was there for 5 years as a storyboard artist, and during that time I got office space with Justin and Ryan.
Yeah. And
we sat down and we did our goals. So part of the idea was to go, what are we doing? Why are we doing it?
Yeah.
So we had been doing, so Justin Ridge was one of my roommates in college. He's now an Emmy nominee for Star Wars Resistance.
Amazing.
And he's a showrunner on that. He worked on Avatar, other things. Wonderful guy. Yeah. But we were roommates. And so whenever we were together, we were always talking about what we wanted to do. We would make this joke. We were like, I figured it out. And then we would pitch it to each other.
Oh, I love that.
And so that's the community part for me at Fullerton, was making friends who I've kept my whole life since then. And it was about encouraging each other. Yep. So we had heard stories about other colleges that were so competitive and cutthroat. And at Fullerton, it was like the inverse. We were all very much like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah. We're all very encouraging. You know, we didn't have a lot of money. We either couldn't get into Cal Arts and Arts Center because we didn't have the talent yet, or we couldn't afford it. And so it was like, well, let's make the best we can out of this place. Yes. And so we were always talking about our goals. And it wasn't everybody. It was a small group. Mm-hmm. And we just kept going. So at that point, Justin had been working in the industry. Ryan was producing a series and it ended up being on YouTube, but it was like a internet animation company. And then I was working at DreamWorks, but we all were like, okay, but now what? Yes. It's like we want to keep going.
Because you're an ambitious person, you'll always feel that way.
Yes. And it was kind of like, if you're shooting for the moon, at least you're going to get to the asteroid field, you know?
Hell yeah.
You know, so it's like, don't shoot for the asteroid field because then you're not going to break the atmosphere.
Right.
So we would sit together and kind of map out, like, okay, if you want to direct, Justin, here's all the steps. Yeah. Like, if something comes up that's like sexy, like, be careful. Because, you know, you can't predict, obviously, how all these things are going to affect your career. Right. But the big idea is, like, if you want to direct, I don't know if that illustration job is going to help you. Josh, if you want to write, it's like, try to make sure that your storyboarding is steering that way. Yeah. You know, so control it as much as you can. Because part of what our theory was, it's like when you're building your resume, it's like you want to make it easy on people. If the resume is all over the place, it's like, it's a harder sell. You might be a harder sell. And so the plan was build a straight line. Yeah. You know, build a straight line to the thing that you want. Yeah. You know, make sure that bridge is stable. So it's like, for me, it's like, okay, storyboarding and then starting to accrue writing credits. Yeah. So as I was wrapping up at DreamWorks, I decided not to pick up my contract after year 5.
You decided or they decided?
They did.
Okay.
And
blessing in disguise?
Absolutely, because they were deciding. I was starting to do punch up on movies. I was being asked to come at the beginning and at the end.
Ooh, okay.
But they didn't know what to do with me.
But that's it still.
Yes.
You're in the room.
Yeah, I was totally in the room. And so, like, I have jokes in How to Train Your Dragon, but I don't have credit because that's not the nature of it, right? So it's like,
that's tough.
It was really tough.
That's really tough.
And I would keep asking for, like, things that I helped co-write. They wouldn't give me credit on. They kept telling me I would never get credit.
Why?
So again, precedent.
Never?
Precedent. So it's the same argument that I got when I asked to take the first trainee test.
But now it sounds like you're asking multiple people.
I am. I am, and I'm still getting no.
It's not just that one person.
Yeah,
oh,
so
man.
it's a lot. So then what happened is I ended up with my first written by credit.
Yeah.
It was for a half-hour DVD special.
Okay.
One that they told me that I wouldn't get writing credit for.
Okay.
And they decided to not pick up my contract. So I ended up doing a storyboard test for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for Nick.
How did you get in the room for that?
So that was a friend knew somebody who was looking, and I was out of work. I had 2 kids at home.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, you have 2 kids at this point?
Yeah,
when your contract ended and they didn't take it back?
Yes.
I can't imagine what going
terrifying.
home and that conversation being like.
Well, and that's what part of the... Well, Amanda's amazing, so that helps all of that.
Yeah.
But part of it was that office space. My plan was, okay, I need a new launch pad.
Yeah.
And I want to do these other things. I want to write novels. I want to do bulk up my writing career. So that workspace, even when I was out of work, was even more important. Right?
Yeah.
Even if it was only temporary.
Right.
So what happened was I did this storyboard test and took it in, and the person who looked at it hated my test.
Oh.
And I knew I had done the best that I could do, but for some reason this person decided to take it personally. And I'm not sure why. And
they took it personally.
They just decided that I had spiked the ball. And I had done the best that I could do. And so it was a very unpleasant experience.
Oh, they were going through something.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But even then, I didn't get the job, so I was like, what am I going to do?
So you go in, you pitch your storyboard for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the series. And it's a storyboard for a story arc of the show or simply an episode? So
the idea is that to hire new storyboard talent, they will give you an audio track and a couple pages of script to board for free.
Yeah.
And they want to see if you can board for the show.
Okay.
So it's a cold read.
Yes, completely.
Okay.
So thankfully, it's like, okay, for some reason, he took it personally.
Didn't work.
You're like, all right, great. And And then what?
So then I was like, well, I have this board. I have this sample board. It's a couple hundred drawings, and I had done it as an animatic. Just a couple hundred.
How long does that take?
It took a couple weeks to draw.
It does.
It took 2 or 3 weeks to draw, probably.
Has the process sped up at all because it's now digital?
It can.
Oh, okay.
It can, but it really comes down to kind of your discipline and pre-planning. And most of the time, it's like that's really where the discipline is for storyboarding. Is like thinking ahead and realizing editing before you start drawing. Thinking before you draw. That's really the thing that I think that's the key thing.
I would say thinking ahead and pre-planning, it works just across the board for anything.
Right? Any anything, yeah. Arts or anything, right?
Completely, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I took that test and I applied for a job on the first Lego movie. I had friends who had worked with Chris Miller and Phil Lord on Cloudy, and so they loved these guys, and they're like, you should, go check this out. So I interviewed. They offered me a job.
Okay.
Then I interviewed on Phineas and Ferb.
Excellent. So I know what happened with Phineas and Ferb interview.
Yes.
It worked out pretty well. And I don't want to skip over this Lego movie.
Yeah.
How did you get into the room? Because it sounds like what's so fascinating about what you're doing is like versus directors in this industry or even actors in this industry.
Yeah.
If a director hears about a movie and they want the movie, they're not going to then turn to their director friend and be like, hey, so there's this movie that I hear about that needs a director.
Sure.
But it sounds like the writing community is so different. It is truly a community where it's like,
and the storyboard
we need
community.
other good people.
And the storyboard community specifically.
So were they already attached to Lego? And they
were
like,
already,
you want to meet with
They
Josh.
were already attached, and I was meeting with one of the co-directors.
Okay.
And the job opportunity came up because of an internship I had at WB.
Oh.
There's this woman, Catherine Concepcion, who was wonderful, and she worked with me for 2 or 3 days back in 2000. I was an intern for 2 or 3 weeks. Justin and I were an intern for WB Animation at the time.
Yeah.
And she was really supportive, and we kept in touch.
What year is this now? That
so 2000 and 2011.
So 9 years.
So 9 or 10 years after the fact.
9 years.
Yeah.
That's what I'm currently finding is that the long game, playing the long game.
Totally.
And I don't know if you experienced this, but me personally, I I was not playing the long game when I touched down here. I would even say, even when I started working professionally, I was still looking at like the next gig, looking at the next step on the ladder, as opposed to, okay, there's an entire staircase. You're
Oh, I like that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That didn't happen for me until late into DreamWorks.
What do you mean?
Like the idea of going, oh, there is a longer game to this.
And do you think being in the environment of DreamWorks was part of that? Because you see people who have careers. Did you see more people in DreamWorks with careers that it's like, they're good, they're in DreamWorks. I feel like, side note, I feel like now our industry is getting shaken up quite a bit. I mean, I'm seeing it personally with Ryan, with like Fox, like, you know, Fox being bought out by Disney. A lot of people are like, who had jobs for 40 years are at home being like, cool, so I just got laid off. What the hell do I do? I've been working for one company. You were in the heart of that when you worked at DreamWorks. So I would imagine you saw a lot of guys in their 50s who had a cush job for 30 years. Did you see someone like you come in, do a run for a few years, leave, and then circle back around? Did you see that?
No, it was pretty rare. And in fact, what I noticed was that people were not working on personal work, and they didn't seem to have a whole lot of ambition. There's like 75 or 85 storyboard artists when I was there at its height. I would say maybe 10 of them were the kinds of folks who would still want to go and make things on the nights and weekends, who were still hungry. And some of them, it was, it's fine for them. It's a day job, and that's awesome.
Right.
But for me, it wasn't ever that simple. And so that really started to change my mind. So I was pitching features there, and I was trying to make a name for myself because I wanted to do more. Yeah. And so some of that worked and some of it was stifled. Yeah. But once I'd gotten the contract ended, it was like, well, now what? Yeah. And this opportunity, like using this failed board, I got 2 job offers in the same week. I got a job offer from Lego Movie. I got a job offer from Phineas the same week.
Amazing.
Same money. And it was a promotion.
Oh my God.
It was a raise. And I ended up picking Phineas because they got writing credit.
You wouldn't have gotten
Lego Movie would, I'll just be a storyboard artist.
Do you feel like if there could be a shift in the writing industry so that people who do punch-ups could get credited, do you feel like that needs to happen, or do you feel the way that the ship is right now, it's maintaining and it does make more sense?
It's really challenging because it's complicated from the standpoint of, one, unions, who's covering who. Okay.
But are you covered by a union if you are Animation
Union,
jokes?
Animation Union, but it's not writing credit. Again, it's part of the job.
And so animation, and is animation different? And obviously the writing, is that covered under WGA? And that's the difference? So then what's the difference?
The difference is no residuals. The difference is it's harder to get credit. So WGA will not touch Animation Guild. At all. Yeah, there's this kind of ongoing conversation. So it's like, for instance, like Simpsons being WGA primetime. Yeah. Because it's primetime, it's a different thing. It came out of a live action tradition. So the original producers outside of Matt Groening came from live action. Okay. So it's like they were able to strike that path in a really specific way. Yeah. So it's like, this is prime time. These are live action people who happen to be writing an animated series. So it's like, that's WGA. That's real easy. Yeah. When it comes to something like Phineas, it's, we're storyboard artists who happen to write. On things like SpongeBob, even back in the day, there were a lot of people who got in trouble for trying to get the writer storyboard artist covered by the WGA. And it's kind of an ongoing battle.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it is, especially if it hasn't gotten figured out, because how many storyboard artists are writing some of the great jokes?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, and at the feature level too. Sorry. TV and feature level. So part of my journey was going, okay, well, if this is the way it is, I need to work my way around it by getting writing credit and pursuing work where I get credit for the work I'm doing.
Yes. So that's why you were like, okay, Lego Movie, you're flashy, you're sexy.
Hey, that'd be great. But I want to get credit for the work I'm doing.
So you pick up Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah, and sold a show to Nickelodeon in the same month. So I went from having no place at DreamWorks,
Oh my
they were done
gosh.
with me, to 2 jobs and selling a show.
How fast was that turnaround?
It was like 3 or 4 weeks when it came down to it. There were some scary times.
So many people hate you right now. So I just,
Yeah.
I mean,
The show didn't
that's
go.
nuts.
Yeah, but it was a great
this is great.
it was a great validation. It was like,
yes.
these people don't like you. Turtles doesn't like you.
Totally.
Depends on who you show your stuff to.
Yes.
It's like, no, I got lots of love over here.
Yeah.
Oh, they really liked my stuff over here.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this place really likes my ideas.
Totally.
Like there's a guy who runs television for DreamWorks now, Peter Gal, and I ran into him, years later after DreamWorks.
Yeah.
And he was kind of trying to track what I was doing with my career. He's like, what happened after DreamWorks? And he was like, wait. He was like, you left DreamWorks, sold a show, and then went on to the highest rated kids show in the world?
I mean,
and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that.
Right.
I was like, I
That's
just needed
amazing.
a job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, first thing I do want to say, I love that he acknowledged that, because one thing that I just talked about in another acting tip video, where this industry, people will play whack-a-mole on your accomplishments like it's nothing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you ever experienced this. I'm actually curious. In working on something like Phineas and Ferb, it's amazing. But did anyone be like, yeah, but that's just a kid's show?
Oh, sure, all the time.
I mean,
Yeah.
my God.
Again, it depends on who's looking.
Yeah.
It's all relative.
Yeah.
So it's like it's amazing to have been a part at all.
Yeah.
Of something that people love.
Mm-hmm.
That's a gift.
Right.
That's a gift.
And what was your run on that? How long?
Season 4 and into what is technically season 5, which is all the specials. We did 4 or 5 hour-long specials. One of which is an original that I pitched.
Ooh.
Called Night of Living Pharmacists.
Yes, it's great, and you feature. You're in it.
Yeah, it's really
and
fun.
Animated Josh
it's super
is
fun.
in it.
Apparently, they were looking for a way to do zombies for years. I didn't know this.
Oh.
And so I did the same thing on Phineas I did at DreamWorks, which was I was just knocking on doors going, can I pitch original ideas?
Yes.
So the way it worked was that the writers who would write the outlines, they would pass those outlines to the storyboard team.
Okay.
So that was me and another person. So we would then split at the 11 minutes.
Okay.
And write and storyboard the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And pitch that back and massage, and then it would get edited. And but we did not originate the outlines.
Got it. So you were basically working on an idea that someone gave you.
Correct.
And fine-tuning it.
Yes.
Okay.
3 or 4 pages, big wonderful idea, cool character arcs, and then we would flesh it out and then take it along.
A script.
Yeah.
Kind of
actually, it would end up being the actual board. So we would actually write the dialogue in the storyboard, but we were all writing. And at some point, I was like, hey, can I pitch this part?
Yes.
I want to pitch original ideas. And most people hadn't. They either were afraid of getting rejected, or there was sometimes there was a little bit of animosity between the groups.
I would imagine that there would be.
So I ended up going to the story editor, Scott Peterson. Scott
This
Peterson.
guy
And that's actually how we met. And I said, hey, can I?
Yes.
And he was like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And it turned out that Scott was a big horror buff.
Oh my gosh.
And he was actually born on Halloween. And so I was like, hey, I have this funky idea.
Oh my God.
What do you think?
Yes.
And he wrote it with me. We pitched it. Dan and Swampy really loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And it got turned into a full special.
Amazing.
And it was like George Romero was in it.
Such a
it was
fun
such a
episode
dream.
too.
Oh, thanks.
I love it.
I'm really proud of him.
I want to talk about Scott. Obviously, getting someone who is basically already at the. What would you say? You were a storyboard artist, and they were the head writers. Is that what
he
you
was
were
the head writer?
Okay, so
Scott
he's
was
a
the
head
writer,
and you have that friction. Are you ever working together, being collaborative in the same room, or were you guys in separate rooms?
We would always pitch in the same room. So we would go away, do the work, pitch it to the whole team. Yes. So myself and my partner would do all the work. We would then pitch it to the team.
Okay.
And the writers and Scott would be in that room with the producers. Everyone's chiming in, adding jokes, making changes, making sure everything tracks. The story he tells is that we were in a story room and I was giving notes on someone else's board. Yeah. And he was like, that's a really good idea. Like, and he wasn't expecting that. It wasn't like, it wasn't just a joke. It was like a content or story arc pitch. Yeah. And I wasn't outside of my realm of contribution, but he was just like, most people don't do that. Like Josh had this sense of the whole.
Yes.
And so I think that kind of, first he thought I was obnoxious. His first thing was
good.
like, it was great. It was like big, loud, and stupid. And he's like, this guy, whatever. And I think he kind of wrote me off. And then I started making those kinds of comments in story meetings. And he was like, oh, maybe there's more to this guy than I thought.
How long was it before that seed was planted? That
I think probably a little while. Maybe
like
6 months.
6 months.
Maybe,
oh, wow.
maybe.
So like you were there. You earned your keep at that point. It's not like you rolled in and then you started making waves. I love that.
No way. I was definitely trying to establish myself. They did myself and Eddie Pittman, who was my first partner, we were both new. Yeah. And so we were trying to establish ourselves on the show.
I would imagine.
And, minded our P's and Q's.
Yeah.
And I think by my third or fourth episode, I was asking questions and trying to figure out, like, how does this work? And learn about editorial, learn about post, trying to get a sense of the whole.
Was that difficult coming in season 4?
Definitely.
It was a ship that was all up and running. We're successful. There's a sense of, like, I would imagine when you said a lot of people were scared to, it's like, because the ship is running just fine without there.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I was definitely intimidated. I was definitely intimidated. And so, but I was really leaning into the thing that I thought that I did best, which is writing. And so I was trying to come up with really cool ideas and trying to be very open, trying to contribute at that level. And by and large, the response was really positive.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I have to ask really quick because there's some brilliant artwork in here as well by Brian. I hope I'm saying
Ajar.
This. Ajar.
Yeah,
Thank
Brian
you.
Ajar. Yeah.
Brian Ajar or Ajar?
I think it's Ajar. Yeah.
Brian Ajar.
Brian, forgive me.
And I just Brian Ajar. I mean, seriously, like even just like a T-shirt is so I can only
it's
imagine.
So great. Yeah.
But this one is.
Oh, it's so fantastic.
Amazing.
It's so fantastic.
I freaking love it. Were you at Phineas and Ferb when Shipwreckers came to be?
No, it was actually much later. What happened was Phineas happened. Scott and I were working together. We enjoyed it.
Okay.
I ended up doing other things. Finished that up.
Yeah.
Scott asked me back to help out on a Phineas special where I was writing full time.
Okay.
And at that same time, Scott got tapped to develop Haunted Mansion for Disney TVA.
So you were with Scott with Haunted Mansion.
So the idea was he had pulled me on board.
Oh my God.
And he was like, I want you to do this with me. And I was like, oh, this is a dream come true. Yeah. It was the thing that Scott really wanted.
Yeah.
They were not thrilled with me coming on board, to be perfectly honest. Development at Disney.
Why?
Same kind of thing. It wasn't protocol. There was no precedent. They thought Scott was enough.
They were like, we don't need more.
I know.
Okay.
It's a recurring theme for Josh.
No. Don't even say that. So I loved what you did for the pitch for Haunted Mansion.
Oh, right.
So can you share a bit of that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
So Scott and I sat down and we did a really elaborate deck. So the pitch deck is like, it's a giant PDF.
Okay.
And so we had artwork in there that Grizz had done. We had our own kind of artwork that we had cobbled together so that you could pitch through the whole story.
Yeah.
Scott and I had kind of beat it out a script so that, because we like to be silly. Mm-hmm. We like to be silly. And Scott makes haunts. So he did them for fun. He also did them professionally for 2 or 3 years.
And
haunts are like home haunted houses.
Yeah.
So it's like and they were having lines around the block for these things.
Oh my gosh.
So Scott, because he's obsessed with Halloween, he had all this stuff. So we brought in skeletons, we brought in Haunted Mansion lights and props and crazy coffins, so that when we were pitching this thing, they would walk into the mansion. The music was playing. It was a whole thing.
These are executives coming into a room that they're like, I've got at 1 o'clock, I gotta go. And instead they're coming into a haunted house with music and everything.
Yep.
Were you guys dressed up?
We were not, because we wanted to make sure we were comfortable, but some of the skeletons were.
Oh my God, I love it. I love it. Yeah. Okay, so rad. Okay, and then I know you want to talk about the book.
Yeah, so. We will get there, yeah.
Okay, you're okay if we have a couple more questions with the crew. Okay.
Yes.
So now, obviously, like that, I think that's part of the industry that is so tough. That's a really tough pill to swallow, especially someone who's in animation school right now, who's like, cool, so I just get an internship. It sounds like everything is good, and if you're good to go with your pitching and your artwork, you'll have some sort of gig, and especially if you get greenlit, but that's not the case, especially like Haunted Mansion.
Yeah.
I mean, what was your day-to-day like for them to completely pull the rug out from under you?
We were doing a couple different drafts. The director that we were working with, I think we were just seeing different movies, and initially things were going really well.
Yeah.
And then not so much, and that kind of coincided with the end of our quote unquote time.
What are some, which is nuts,
Yeah.
what are some like coping mechanisms that you do when you have something like that?
Well, that was seismic. That was really huge.
Yes.
And I think the big thing was all my heroes have stories like that.
Okay.
So all the people that I admired, like looking at Jim Cameron's career or Tim Burton or, all of these people or Robert Rodriguez, people who drew, who were also filmmakers.
Yeah.
Those are the people, my touchstones early on.
Yeah.
And, all of these folks, even Spielberg, all these people we look up to, they all have these stories of where things didn't work out, things they had put their heart into. And so on some level, it was like, okay, well, now this is our story, right? This is our story, and we'll get better next time, or maybe we'll get closer next time. One of the things that actually was a comfort was something that fell apart and then came back together. Scott was approached to adapt Jon Favreau's Jungle Book back into a novel.
Oh my Jesus.
So to take the screenplay and turn it back into a book for middle grade readers.
Wow.
And at the time we were really busy and we were developing Mansion, and Scott wasn't sure he had the time to do it. We had this thought. So this again comes out of this short-term, long-term. We knew that if Disney was going to do this, they were going to do books. And long term, Scott and I knew we wanted to do this or something like it.
Okay, I was going to say specifically Shipwreckers, or
No.
You knew that you wanted to write a middle
We
school
wanted to do
novel
novels
together.
we knew that like long term, like we want to do that.
Yeah.
And so Scott ended up writing the editors back and saying, "Can Josh do this with me?" And they agreed.
That's a good writing partner.
And I had written my first novel at that point, so I at least had some confidence.
Right.
And so I was like, I think we can do this.
Yeah.
I think we can pull this off. And our thought was, if we do Jungle Book, we have a relationship with these editors.
Yeah.
We had plotted out, so we had our 3 Haunted Mansion specials. We had a plan, which was to do 6 books.
Holy goodness.
So there would be a book that would adapt Special 1, a book in the middle, a new book for Special 2, and it would be like this 6-book set.
Yeah.
We knew what the stories were.
Like a Harry Potter.
Like Harry Potter.
Holy goodness.
I had gone into Photoshop and I had actually made the book covers.
Oh my gosh.
And I made a box set.
And this is all for Haunted Mansion.
This is all for Mansion.
Wow.
And so we had already written Jungle Book.
Yeah.
We had adapted it, and the thinking at the time was, okay, well, Mansion's gone now. They kind of took it away from us. At that point, we had already pitched to franchise. They were excited about the books.
Yeah.
So it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, well, the step was supposed to be Jungle Book, Mansion books, originals.
Yeah.
So let's skip to originals.
Yeah.
So Jungle Book turned out all right.
Yeah.
They seemed pleased. We pitched a couple ideas, one of which was Shipwreckers.
Okay.
And they went for it.
So this was the same company that pulled Haunted Mansion. You're going back to them and being like, I totally understand. I have this other idea for you. So it's just, it sounds like, it's so much about getting back up.
Yeah, you take it on the chin and you get up, Spider-Man.
How fast is that turnaround from?
Really fast, breakneck, because we didn't want to lose any time.
What is breakneck?
So we were already working on Milo Murphy's Law. We were literally in the same place where they continued to work on the project without us. We just ignored that part of the building.
Jesus.
And then we were pitching them Shipwreckers right away.
While you were on Milo Murphy's Law?
While we were on Milo.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and the two of you got onto Milo.
Yes.
And that was, did you pitch together?
So Scott was going to be head writer again.
Okay.
And because of Night of Living Pharmacists.
Yeah.
Dan was comfortable. Dan and Swampy were comfortable hiring me as a full-time writer.
Yeah.
So that was a huge transition. So writing freelance Mansion, I was a writer and consulting producer technically. But my day job.
Sorry,
Go
I'm
ahead.
making this connection because Phineas and Ferb, you're not a writer.
I'm writer, board artist, right? So so because of Pharmacists and Mansion, Dan and Swampy were like, yeah, you can come on as a full-time writer. So it happened.
So Milo Murphy's Law was huge.
Yeah,
like that was a huge turning point.
And I got to contribute at the very beginning stages of the show. And so it helped
to create it too.
Yeah, well, develop it, I would say.
Sorry.
No,
I understand. There's a difference between developing and creating. So
and Dan and Swampy were really open to it. You know, there were things that they really were that they had clear in their heads, and there were other things we're like, we're not sure about this. Yeah. So we were able to add that.
I love that.
And I ended up writing more than half of them. I think when it comes down to it, more than half of the stories.
Oh my gosh!
So it was a hell of an adventure. It was a great time.
How long was the time frame of that?
It was like 18 months, almost 2 years.
Does it? How many seasons is that?
Milo ended up being 2 seasons, but there was a big hiatus between. So it stretched out over 3 or 4 years. And it ended up like from release.
Oh, I see.
Like you got this chunk of episodes, this chunk of episodes.
And then how long does it take? Like being on a sitcom, it's a week to shoot, and then however long. How long is it? Is it the same?
It's about
timeline?
9 months. It's about 9 months for one episode. They're overlapping, so like you would launch one episode, and it's 9 months before you get the final, or 6 months to see it.
But what's the work like?
So
for the animators and whatnot.
So it's like 3 to 6 months for animation.
Okay.
And post. Writing it is about 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's about average. From what I hear about 6 weeks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but 3 to 6 months to animate it.
Yeah, and then there's post, and then there's design, and storyboard is in there, and storyboarding is anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks, depending, and editorial.
So you must have multiple teams, because no way is it like, cool, we have a 30-minute episode, so we're going to spend 6 months on this, and then after that's done, 6 months. So it's multiple people constantly.
4 to 6 teams, depending on the show. 3 teams, usually 2 or 3 directors.
How many did Milo's have?
I think Milo had 2 supervising directors, and then we had, I think 4 storyboard teams.
Rad.
Yeah.
Okay, so being on a storyboard team is awesome, and then but the writers is kind of like really like.
There are 4 or 5 of us.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So versus the storyboard teams.
Correct.
Now I'm seeing it. Now I'm seeing the.
So because we were a
the
script,
pyramid.
That's the pyramid.
Got it.
Right. Because we were a script-driven show. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so are you creating and brainstorming Shipwreckers while you're on Milo?
Yeah. So the way it worked was we were still employees, so we were like, okay, in a perfect world, we would be freelancers and then get to create something and pitch it.
Okay.
But because we are already employees, it's a little harder.
Yeah.
So they end up owning more of the IP than we would want.
Okay.
But our thought at the time, our strategy, was if Disney can help launch us into this space, it's worth the sacrifice.
Did you feel like you were already in this space with your previous novel?
No, not necessarily, because it was an adaptation.
Okay.
So it's very different. Okay. It's a little more rarefied in that the movie helps sell the book.
Got it.
So it's like there's more shelf space.
And that's Jungle Book.
That's Jungle Book.
Jungle Book, yeah.
So we might be in a grocery store. We might be, so the numbers are going to be better for that.
Right, but it doesn't. But it's different because they're looking at it. Well, the Jungle Book is already like okay.
Different
versus
animal, so to
Shipwreckers,
speak.
Totally right out of the brain.
Joshua
Pruett.
Yeah.
And Scott Peterson. And I have a question. So, what was the brainstorming like? How did you come up with this? When it comes down to actually writing it, how long does it take? And also, a huge question is it like Scott had the even chapters, you had the odd? I'm so curious. How do you write a book together?
We did this thing on Jungle Book. So we had a script, which was a great starting point, right?
Yeah.
So we took the script and we just cut it in half.
Oh.
So I got the front half.
Are you serious?
Scott got the back half. And at this point, we've been working with each other for a little while.
Okay.
So we kind of trust each other.
Yeah, that's a lot of trust.
Yeah, it's a lot of trust. So I went off and turned the script into prose. Mm-hmm. I added a couple things. We had a plan. We sat down together and we kind of mapped out like what small adjustments did we want to make. We're adjusting the theme a little bit.
Yes.
We want to, like, there's things they do in the movie that were different.
Okay.
And so we got our heads around that and then wrote.
Yeah.
So we took like 4 to 6 weeks.
Wow.
Like first draft.
For the first draft,
I do one half, he does the other half.
Of Shipwreckers?
Of Jungle Book.
Jungle Book.
Of Jungle Book. So we established that.
How long is Jungle
setup.
Book? How many pages?
It's a little shorter than Shipwreckers. So it's like two.
That's you're
200-300
working.
pages.
You are churning out some pages.
I was trying to do a chapter a day.
I have a question. Do you have lit agents at this point or managers, or is this still you guys?
I did at this point because there was interest in my first novel.
Okay.
But then I needed to get work, and so that kind of took us. But I had a lit agent. Scott has a manager.
So I did. Side note: did the agent help you get stuff? Because I hear it quite a bit from writers that you get your own work, and it's kind of like the agents.
Depends on the circumstance.
Okay.
So for Jungle Book, we got the gig.
Which is amazing.
Because like they had worked with Scott.
Yes.
They had worked with Scott on Phineas and Ferb spin-off material.
Okay.
And they're like, Scott was a warm body and someone they could trust.
Completely.
So it was like, oh, can you help us out?
Yeah.
Shipwreckers was we went and made the connection, and then the agents got involved.
Oh, well, they're like, commission, I see it.
Yes.
I can smell the money.
Right.
Did that feel, were you happy to like have an agent? Because then did you turn in pages to your agent?
So I think we CC'd them when we first pitched it. So what we did for Shipwreckers was we had wanted to write something that all the jokes stayed in. So the nature of the collaborative process, especially in animation, is like, it's a lot of voices. And so we would always be pitching dad jokes, puns, ridiculous things. Some stick, some don't.
Yeah.
And we wanted to write something where it was all going to stay because Scott and I wanted it to stay.
So no killing the babies.
No killing the babies.
No killing babies.
No, the whole thing is that it's a whole baby, right? And the appeal for print was like, this is one step removed from me literally telling you the story.
Oh my gosh. Right.
So it's like when it comes to animation, there are over 100 human beings who might be involved in that process.
Yeah.
And that's not always bad. Most of the time it's good.
Right.
But invariably things get changed or watered down or adjusted. Right. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
It's part of, you get paid under the understanding that that's going to happen.
Right.
And you get over it and you don't take it personally. You build it, you accept it, and you're a professional, all that stuff.
Completely.
And for this, we're like, no. Like, we want this to be what's in our heads.
Okay.
And so we pitched the concept. They liked the concept.
Okay.
And we were like, oh, it would be really funny if Indiana Jones was an idiot.
Okay.
And Short Round was doing all the work.
Oh, great.
And so that's where we started.
I love it.
And then we also loved Jungle Cruise. This is before they were developing this movie with The Rock. So we were like, oh, that is the tone.
Okay.
We want a real adventure with the tone of Jungle Cruise. And so we started building this story. We gave them a pitch, like 3 or 4 pages, of what our intentions were.
Before you stepped into the room? Or?
This was after they had said, we're interested in the idea.
So when you go into the room, is it just like, I hear it's like 8 minutes and just kind of, it's casual.
It can be. In this, it was very casual.
So you go in, you're like, hey guys, so we're thinking of this. You had no artwork. You just had an idea in your head that you had talked over with Scott.
Big idea.
Blah, blah, blah. We're keeping all our jokes.
Yeah.
And they were like, all right, we're interested.
Yeah.
And then
they're like, go away.
Yes.
And said, great. So we had a pitch. We had 2 sample chapters.
Okay,
most of which remained unchanged. They're the finale for the book. We knew what the ending was. And
which is so important.
Yeah, and it was actually like kind of our favorite part, which is great because it's like, then we have something to build toward.
Yes, because it's totally open for the next chapter.
Yeah, cliffhangers.
Oh my God.
Cliffhangers. So that was part of the design. And then what we did 2 silly things.
Yeah.
Because of my storyboard experience, I knew there's a program called Toon Boom Storyboard Pro. Okay. Digital storyboarding.
Okay.
You can create animatics. Very simple, short animatics. Animatics are just like, it's a short video, right?
Yes.
So we did a mock trailer.
Through this, is it an app that people can go to?
I think it's like software that you would download if you wanted to storyboard professionally. And there's an editing component, so you can add music, you can add dialogue to your storyboards, you can time them. So I learned that when I was working on Phineas.
Oh.
And so I took music. I think this was I usually steal music from your hubby. In this case, I don't think I did. I did later.
RyanDemery.com.
RyanDemery.com. And put all, like, it was a joke.
Okay.
The idea was to give them a sense of tone. And the tone was from the guys who've done this and who've written the weirder episodes of Phineas and Ferb.
Brilliant.
And it was like, fake lens flare, garbage, very dramatic voice. Martin Olson, who worked on our show with us, he did the voiceover for me.
Yeah.
And the end of it was, coming in 2017, actually 2019. Sometimes adventure forgets to wear pants.
Oh, I love that.
And that was like our tagline, and the title came up, and there was a music crescendo and an explosion.
Brilliant.
And so we put that package together, and then we called our editor, and we pretended to be her bosses.
No, you did not.
And it was a message. So we left a message saying, "Oh, this Shipwreckers is so great. Brittany, this is amazing." And of course, you could tell that it's us.
Yes.
So she goes into what's called a P&L meeting, profit and loss meeting.
Okay.
She has all our materials.
Okay.
She sent it out to there's like a room of 12 people.
So when you say editor, was she already the editor, or we were still pitching for her to possibly be the editor at this point?
Both at the same time.
Got it.
So because she had worked, her name is Brittany Rubiano, because she had worked with us on Jungle Book, we were pitching her this.
Got it.
So she was like, "I like this."
So you need to pitch to your editor?
Oh, yeah.
So you need to pitch to be like, "I hope you'll be my editor on this."
Yeah.
As opposed to like, "I need an editor." Great. Can you be my editor?
Yeah, because what you're trying to do is build relationships.
Okay.
So if you find an editor who likes your stuff, and Brittany liked what we had done so far, she was down.
Yeah.
And there were other ideas we pictured that she didn't care for, didn't connect to, but she connected with this.
Oh, okay.
She liked Shipwreckers.
Okay, I love that.
So she was like, "Great, like, let me see what I can do." So we gave her all the material. She shared that with her team.
The material, and just in like list form, it's 2 chapters. You had the synopsis, I take it. You had this
we had like a 10-page outline. Yeah.
You had a 10-page outline.
Yes, and then we had the fake trailer.
And the fake trailer.
But she played our fake message for the entire room.
I love this.
So it was like we were just trying to sell us because there was no book yet.
That's
Part
so
of what
smart.
we're trying to sell was, oh no, we're funny. We've worked in kids entertainment. We're working on Milo. We worked on Phineas. Josh has feature experience. Scott's done this.
It's huge.
So we put all that together, and they're like, "Yeah, okay, we'll do that.
Okay.
We'll do Shipwreckers."
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty amazing.
How long did it take you? It took 6 weeks to do the first draft of it.
Yeah, it was similar to Jungle Book in that way. So Scott and I kind of carted out the whole story like you would a screenplay.
Yeah.
We thought of it like a movie.
Okay.
It had 3 acts.
Yeah.
We looked at all our character arcs. We had a sense of where we were headed.
Do you do Post-it notes and stuff?
Post-its and index cards.
Is it in person typically?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep. We use big boards.
Mm-hmm.
And split it up again.
So which half is it? Well, I would say which half is yours?
First half.
I'm so curious.
First half.
Oh my God! Stop
First
it
half,
right
first
now!
half.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, that's so exciting!
And then we switched again.
Oh my gosh!
So I did the first half. Scott did the back half. We had done the climax together already.
What?
And then we rewrote each other.
That's great.
So we traded it off. And the beauty part about working together for so long is that I can go, "This sucks," or he can say, "Josh, this is terrible." And I go, "Okay, you're right.
Oh my god!
But let me keep this."
But you have that. Yeah.
Yes. And so we really trust each other.
Yeah.
The book that we've written after this, that we're editing now still, we switched. So he did the front and I did the back.
Can we hear,
It's all secret stuff.
Okay.
It's all secret stuff.
Did you pitch it and get...
No, not yet.
So you're writing a novel on spec.
This one's on spec. So this one we got paid to write.
Oh, okay.
And we wrote one on spec.
What's the difference, in your opinion? In your experience?
This has been harder because it's harder to make time for something that you're not getting paid for.
Yeah.
So it's just taken longer. And it's really something we're passionate about because it's actually like horror movie for kids.
Oh my gosh.
So it's like right our vibe. The new one.
Oh my god. The book, the novel itself is like a
Yeah. It's like in a Stranger Things but like dark
I love
and
that.
stuff.
Okay, great.
But it's taken a lot longer because we have to come back to it slowly because of all these other things.
Yeah.
So in the midst of all of that, Scott got to showrun The Last Kids on Earth for Netflix.
Amazing.
I got to help out a little bit with that.
Oh my gosh.
I got to work on Mystery Science Theater relaunch in the midst of all that. And so hopefully maybe more Last Kids will come up. But so Scott's doing that now full time. Okay. I'm working at Warner's in their feature department, helping to develop some ideas right now.
Yeah.
But we still want to do more with Shipwreckers.
More Shipwreckers.
And we want to do more books. Yeah.
And then you also want to direct. That was another big thing that you were just talking about before. Before we started this interview.
Yeah. I think long term, I think what I'm looking at is, maybe live action and trying to make things. I think that's really what I'm after. So whether it's directing or someone else is directing, but I'm writing and producing.
Right.
It's like the fact that this exists in three-dimensional space, and it's a story that I can hand to people and go, look what Scott and I did. Yeah. Look what Scott and I and Brian did. Like, that's a tremendous thing. Right. And so I'm really addicted to that. And it's like, I want to do that all the time. And you want to have
more things to
hand to people. I want to make stories and share them with people.
Sure, a number of writers do, but I do wonder how much it's like, is this my problem, or do other people? It's almost like resenting the work because it's in front of you. You're like, I have no idea if anyone's even going to want to read it, or like I'm not getting paid for it.
Sure.
How do you deal with that? Do you have any, like, have you obviously, like, tell me, like, have you experienced that?
I've definitely experienced that, and the thing that's really helped me is micro accomplishments. So for me, it's like, can I do an hour?
Okay.
Can I do 2 pages?
Okay.
Because I get really ambitious, and then I'm like, I don't know how much time I really have, like in a day.
Yeah.
Working full time, doing freelance.
Yeah.
Trying to be a good dad, have a family.
Right.
And it's like, for me, it's okay if I can do 2 pages or edit a chapter of the book that Scott and I are working on.
Yeah.
I'll try to do that a couple times a week.
Right.
Or try to do like a half hour a day.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that's helped me.
Yeah.
Because it's overwhelming. It can be really overwhelming, and that's all in my spare time. Like doing Shipwreckers, doing Jungle Book, doing the new book. It's all in our spare time. It's carving all of that out, and it's like doing Jungle Book and the book before it, like, it was a chapter a day.
Right.
It was, once you knew what you were doing,
you'd find the time.
You found the time, but it was about those bite-sized pieces.
Yes.
It was like, oh, I can edit these 2 pages.
Yeah.
Or I can write this scene.
Yeah.
But that's it.
Yeah.
Because outside of that, I think it's really easy to get overwhelmed and discouraged. And so, if I read a chapter of the book a night and make some notes, hey, I'm moved forward.
Yeah.
I hadn't done that the night before.
Right.
I think the thing that's the hardest is the gestation period can take the longest amount of time, where you're trying to break the back of the thing.
Yeah.
And then you're just trying to get ugly pages done.
And it's almost like if it's bad writing, it's writing.
It's still writing.
It's still writing.
And Scott actually had a thing that he taught me that I really love, which is, even if you can't write, you can type. So just sit there and put ugly stuff in.
Okay.
Don't edit or think it's going to be good. Don't worry about it.
Right.
You know that they're going to say X, Y, and Z. Write that.
Yeah.
Literally write, they make a funny joke. Keep going.
Oh my God.
Because it's easier to edit that than to sit there for an hour staring at your screen.
Right.
And so some of that, not everything you work on professionally you are engaged with.
Yeah.
There's some episodes of TV that I've gotten to write, some I'm hugely proud of.
Yeah.
Other ones are like, this is half-baked and I don't know how to fix this. Mm-hmm. But I sat down and I wrote it and we tried to make it better.
And you did the best that you could, and then at some point you're like, this is good enough.
Yeah.
You mentioned being a father.
Yeah.
So I want to ask what are the difficulties that you've had to overcome, and then also you are vocal on Twitter about your son, and he has ADHD.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit about those challenges?
I have a son and daughter. My daughter's 10. Yeah. My son he's going to be 9. He was diagnosed a couple years ago. Mm. And certainly anything you're pursuing that occupies as much time as what we do, time is always a factor.
Totally.
And one of the things I love about animation is that by and large the hours are pretty normal.
Okay.
So that's a gift.
Yeah.
Not all, most of the people in animation either want to go home or have families they want to go home to.
Yeah.
So the very little live action stuff I've done, or the friends I've worked with and talked to have live action experience, it's not always the case. And the hours are crazy. So that's a gift.
Yeah.
But certainly it's like, as someone who wants to do extracurricular things,
right.
you know, I'm up late a lot, you know, and what happens is there's a knock-on effect. So I'm not my best self all the time because a knock-on effect.
A knock-on?
So in other words, like, it's like this happens, which causes this, which causes this.
Okay.
So, you know, if I'm not getting the rest that I need because I'm up late freelancing or doing my dream project, then maybe I don't have the patience that I normally would have.
Exactly.
And one of the challenges with my son is, you know, the way ADHD works is that it requires an extra, like, a superhuman amount of patience. And to help my son create workarounds and behavioral helps so that he can get through his day and his challenges.
Totally.
But you've got to be in really good, you've got to be in a good place yourself in order to help somebody else. So the analogy that I always come up with, it's like that, you know, being on a plane and they're like, you know, you put the oxygen on yourself before you put it on your kid.
Exactly.
Before I had a kid, I didn't understand that. Now I do.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if I'm not at my best, I can't help him or my daughter or my wife.
Right.
So for me, it's about, okay, can I carve out exercise? Can I make better health choices? Can I make sure I get more sleep? So the way it all plugs in is like, okay, I can't stay up till 2 a.m. in the morning like I used to. Right?
Right.
But I can do an hour, go to bed at 11.
Okay.
So I've done the hour, right?
Okay.
So 10 to 11, I've worked on Shipwreckers or the sequel.
Right.
Go to bed, get up, help the kids get out the door, and then take a walk, jog, something. The days that I've done that, I'm a better parent. And so, but there's days I can't.
Exactly.
And so I think the struggle is ongoing, and it's, you know, he takes medication that sometimes help him at school, and then we're also looking into other behavioral therapies. Also, part of it is trying to make sure that my daughter doesn't get ignored.
Right.
Because the nature of it is that he requires so much help and attention. And it's making sure that I'm still plugged into what she's doing, even though by and large she's very low maintenance. You know, she's an artist too. She loves to draw. She loves story.
She's a huge reader because she's, you said and 10?
She's 10,
and she's read this several times over, and it's like 300 pages.
Yes.
And I know me at 10 years old, no way was I getting, there aren't that many pictures in here. Brian, we need more pages from you because, I mean, it's, right?
That was like Scott, that was Zach's like only criticism is that he wants more drawings. Zach got through the first 100 pages, I think.
Oh my gosh.
But he's a big reader too, thank God.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's at 9 years old, 100 pages. That's a huge accomplishment.
It's a lot, yeah.
A lot.
But he loves to read. He loves to read, thank God. But you know, I would test the jokes in the book on them.
Oh my gosh.
So like, if they laughed, it stayed.
You have a built-in audience.
I had a built-in audience,
especially for this.
And it's a heck of a window. Like right now, they think what Dad does is pretty cool. I know. And it's like at some point they're gonna lose interest completely, and it's like I need to write more books now. You know?
Yes.
But I think the parenting component is a struggle for me. Like I don't necessarily feel like I'm somebody who was born to be a dad.
Really?
I just it's just my feeling. Like I have friends who they seem to get a lot more joy out of it than I do.
Okay.
And I love my kids.
Yeah, I know you do.
But being a dad is tougher than I thought it was going to be. And I don't often feel like I've got the equipment to do it. So that's really tough. That can be tough. And I try not to put any extra, pressure on myself.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be the best dad ever.
Right.
But certainly it seems like for some people that's their calling or part of their calling.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I've never really felt that. And I've been blessed with an amazing wife, which really helps.
Yeah. Do you feel like for her, it's a bit for her that she does feel like that is part of who she is? And
I think more so, and I think it's more of her personality. She's a very patient person.
Okay.
She is not as volatile as I am.
Oh.
But as a singer and an artist herself, I think like she's a little more balanced that way.
Yeah.
And I tend to be kind of all or nothing kind of person. And so it's a difficult balance to strike. And I've, in that same way that Justin and I used to always go, I figured it out.
Right.
I haven't figured this part out yet.
Do you ever feel like there are moments where you're like, cool, I told like there's got to be like those good weeks where you're like, I'm awesome right now.
Yes. And I guess part of my issue is that my expectation or my hope is that it lasts for more than a day.
Yeah.
And what I'm realizing is like kids help teach you to live in the moment. Yeah. And like you and I are talking, it's like I've been living in the future for the last 10 years.
Who hasn't?
Right? Like I have these plans, I have these ambitions. My dreams are tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I've been developing a discipline for how to get there and build bridges and build doors.
Right.
But having kids like teaches you to live now because that's how they are built.
Exactly.
And so I'm still developing those muscles, and it's just slower than I wish I was. I wish I was as good at that as I am at this.
Well, I think you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you.
And I think your kids are fantastic.
Thank you.
And Amanda, I adore you.
Me too.
Thank you so much for being
My pleasure,
for being with us. And where can we buy Shipwreckers?
It's at your local Barnes & Noble.
Oh.
And also please order it from your local bookstore as well.
Okay.
But it's on Amazon. It's on barnesandnoble.com. And the paperback is coming out January 28th.
Oh, that's very exciting.
Yeah,
January
I'm thrilled.
28th, the paperback is... The hard copy is pretty fancy.
Yeah, it's very fancy. Yeah.
Check it out. Josh, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Cheryl.
This is lovely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yay!
Bye, guys.
Yay! It was so good.